Okay, hi everyone. So this is the second tutorial. The principle of this one is to use again, just using a raw accelerometer value as a switch. So if I zoom in here on the switch and press P for parameter, you'll see that that index number here is changing. Should be kind of like with 45-degree rotations of the physical sensor. Input 3, 2, 1, 0. So the principle of this one, again, it's just using really math, which is to work out, what's the angle of rotation that we need to grab, and then making sure that they go from being these floating point values up to hard integers that go into the switch. And then we'll be switching. At this point, I've just got constants as colors, but of course these could be video files. They could be switching between different 3D models, like in the previous tutorial. That switch could be switching between all sorts of things. So I'm just doing it with colors to keep everything else simple, and then you can really think about whether this might be useful for something else you're doing. Okay, so let's go back into that new file I started before. What I'm going to do, I'll just, I'm just going to do the equivalent of starting a new file. I'll delete everything and let's just start again. Okay, so one thing I'll just mention, you can see in my file, I've done a few things which are a little bit more advanced because I know this is not like a TouchDesigner summer series, but the way that I've organized this file with these folders, it starts to get more convenient so that you can have a non-destructive workflow and you can have a bunch of different ideas contained in one file. But just to keep things nice and clean and simple, I'm just going to show you rebuilding these really just as an educational tool so you sort of understand how they work. But I won't go through the whole containerizing stuff because I don't think we have the time for that type of depth. Okay, so just to remind you from last time, here's my OSC in. And if I set it to port 8888, I get the red thing because, of course, I was just demonstrating again on my other file. All right, so just grab this, just set the port to like 0 or something. Good. And now here we are. Okay, so 8888 is now giving us our signal. Okay, so repetition is how we learn. So middle mouse click here. I'm going to grab a select. Oh, that's not select. That's a sequencer. Okay. SEL, select, grab that, and I'm going to grab raw 3. I'm going to pop down a math. I'm just middle mouse clicking on the part there, grabbing my math, left click to drop it down. All right, so let's again assume that we're going from minus 1,000 to 1,000, and we'll come back to the range when we know what we want. Okay. So now we're going to go into 2D space here in the tops. I'm going to put down a constant and I'll go to our resolution here and I'll just set it to full screen, which for the free version of TouchDesigner is 1280 by 720. And let's just make this the default red. Okay. And then I'm going to middle mouse click here and I'm going to put this as our output. So that's what our network would look like if we played it. Nice red screen. Hit escape to go out of the perform window, back into our editor. Okay, so if I want to copy and paste this, Control C, Control V. So now I've got a second constant, and I want to make this say green, and I want to switch between these two. Well, I'd right click here, insert operator. So I would grab a switch in the 2D space. So SWI, there's our switch. And if I pop the switch there and I connect the second green one there, if you see we've got this index here, if I drag this up to 1, it's just a hard switch, right? So as soon as it goes over from the integer below 1 to above 1, we're switching our inputs here. So what we want to do is send a signal from our OSC in to our math, and for no great reason, I made 4 of them in the previous one. We can just make 3 of them here. I can set the color to magenta, also connect that to the switch. So now our index, if we go 0 to 1 to 2, we're switching between these colors. Okay, now, there could also be a crossfade thing where we're looking at the opacity. The reason I'm doing a switch is that I think a switch can be interesting if you're looking at different inputs. They don't have to be images. Again, they could be films and so on. So that's why I'm introducing the switch. And also it gets us into an interesting thing of taking this like series of, this a large interval of numbers and just clamping it down to 3 values. So what we can do, if we want that minus 1,000 to 1,000 to go to a range of 0 to 2, which is what our switch is doing. The only other thing we do is, I'm just going to add another math, is we just want them to come out as integers rather than floating point values, which basically here, if we go integer and say round, it's just going to round off that value between 0, 1, and 2. So now, much like the previous tutorial, if I go into my switch and I'm going to set the math node here to viewer active, and following my own advice, I'll just put a null there, just in case we did anything upstream there. I'm going to viewer active that null, click on the switch, and I'm going to drag that null into the index and just export the chop. So now, the sensor tile is just flipping that switch. Now, just to sort of spark your imagination, instead of colors, if we just had file in, movie file in, and I delete constant 3, come on, delete, and I connect this movie file in as the third option, then I'll just preview this so it's in our background. So red, green, banana. And so the banana file could be a movie, it could be an image, and this could be, I don't know, depending on what you're doing, it could be useful. Okay, so this is using OSC to control a switch. And again, what we can do is if we connect this null to an OSC out, we can then send that message, that 012, as a message back to MaxMSP. So that could also be useful if you want to synchronize whatever you're doing here with this input, again, then with something happening in your sound composition. Okay, all right, I'll see you in the next tutorial.